A convocation marks the official beginning of the academic year. As a result, a convocation address should inspire students, particularly those of you who are new to us, to leave this elegant setting determined to wrestle as much as you possibly can from the marvelous college experience that awaits you. To that end, and after much thought and careful deliberation, I've decided to talk to you about the real world. As many of you know, the real world first aired on MTV in 1992. It now stands as the single longest-running reality TV show aside from Cops. But Cops is just shaky camera footage of double-wide trailers and crazed crystal meth addicts with missing teeth and tattoos. Sublime television in its way. But if you want to see the truly seminal reality television program, the inspiration for everything from Survivor to Big Brother, you need look no further than MTV's groundbreaking piece of gritty televised realism. Each season of which, as you all know, tells the, quote, true story of 7 strangers picked to live in a house, work together, and have their lives taped to find out what happens when people stop being polite and start getting real. I tell you all of this because in the next 4 years, you are going to hear people give you a lot of dark and ominous warnings about the real world. They will tell you that in the real world, things aren't so easy. In the real world, this or that won't fly. People in the real world, they will say, don't have the luxuries you do. And it's true. For one thing, people in the real world can't even open a refrigerator without a camera following them. And they all have to live in the same house with that revolting guy who never showers. And sure, they look all buff and tan and fantastic, but that doesn't mean they don't have issues. Particularly when the other people in the house are so mean and selfish and alcoholic. Now, obviously, MTV's Real World has absolutely nothing to do with the actual real world, any more than reality television can be said to depict reality, or qualify as television. But although MTV can be blamed for a great many crummy things in contemporary life, Pauly Shore, for one thing, we can at least be grateful to MTV for complicating that overused phrase, the real world. Because you will hear quite a bit about the real world, the underlying assumption being that you don't live there yet. You're in college, not the real world. Academia is often and derisively referred to as an ivory tower, a place curiously disconnected from reality, where everyone lives together in some sort of closed-off, hermetic environment like Pauly Shore in Biodome. And liberal arts education institutions like Rhodes are even more susceptible to the charge of ivory towerness, although I don't sense much confusion out there about what one can do with a college education. I do hear quite a bit of anxious worry over what one can do with a liberal arts education. And by do, I take that to mean for a living in the real world. Well, today I would like to explore 3 ways to think about the real world and how a liberal arts education will prepare you for it. And at the end, I'd like to come back to that guy in the real world who never takes a shower. Generally speaking, when people refer to the real world, they mean the world of work, of responsibility, of money earning and housekeeping, bill paying and parenting. Over the next 4 years, some of you will feel an impatience, a nagging sense of guilt about your delayed arrival to that world. My first piece of advice is to resist that guilt, that impatience. For starters, it is unnecessary. You have at your disposal here at Rhodes a wide range of opportunities to connect your classroom experience to the broader world outside, from internships and study abroad programs to service learning courses and fellowships. If you believe that education should be as experiential as possible, then you have come to the right place. So yes, you're more in contact with the real world here than you might think at first. At the same time, don't forget that you have an absolutely rare and unrepeatable opportunity right now to do something that very few people in the history of the world have had an opportunity to do. Namely, to spend 4 years in relative seclusion training this extraordinary instrument, your mind. And make no mistake, there's no quick or easy way to do it. There is no Berlitz tape series or black market steroid, no Nordic track or solo flex machine. To requote my professor, you really have to do the reading. And for my money, or more specifically for yours and your parents' money, nothing better trains that extraordinary instrument than a liberal arts education. It's true that in the last 25 years or so, the term liberal has become as vexed and misused as the phrase the real world. What exactly is a liberal arts education anyway? Actually, the term dates to classical antiquity, where it referred to an education for free men rather than slaves. In fact, the Latin root for liberal, thanks to David Sick, is liber, which means free. It's the same root as in the words liberty and liberate. Nowadays, the term refers to a curriculum that marries the acquisition of general knowledge with a mastery of critical thinking skills. The opposite is any sort of narrowly focused technical, professional, or vocational curriculum. Because a liberal arts education emphasizes learning for its own sake, free of specific vocational application, it also frees you to think critically and independently about real-world phenomena. After all, each field of study only provides a partial picture of reality. As the renowned humanistic psychologist Abraham Maslow once said, when the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. A student well educated in the liberal arts should be able to read science like an artist and understand art with a historian's or philosopher's rigor. A liberal arts graduate will come to see that both metaphor and aesthetics bear on scientific progress, and that economics and political science should take into account the claims of biology, the imperatives of history, and the demands of philosophical ethics. It turns out the experts agree. Just recently, the Association of American Colleges and Universities published a major report titled Greater Expectations that seeks to articulate a vision for higher education in the 21st century. And as Provost Borst shared with the faculty last week, the authors of the report conclude that the single best way to do that is a liberal arts education. Why? Because, the authors argue, only a liberal arts education develops both, quote, mental agility as well as intellectual power, a deep understanding of the world's variety as well as a knowledge of Western culture, ethical action in the service of an individual and society as well as critical judgment. These skills are more important than ever, they go on, because all of you will be entering a, quote, knowledge-based economy and an increasingly interdependent world, both of which will require you to be, quote, nimble thinkers and creative problem solvers. I would add that nimble thinking and creative problem solving will also be immensely helpful as you confront a real world that is becoming harder and harder to access. We live in an age of simulacrum, of mediated experience, of hyperspace and hypertext, of virtual reality and reality TV. You're not just you anymore, you're YouTube. I should tell you that I am a proud card-carrying member of the reality-based community, and I would like to welcome all of you here as well. There is no better training for citizenship here than to spend 4 years training that mind to study reality judiciously in all its complexity and as a unified whole with more than just a hammer. I'd like to address one final aspect of the term the real world. The phrase is often used as a shorthand way to enlist you in a cowardly cynicism from which your education here at Rhodes can and should wean you. That all sounds very noble and idealistic, people will say, but it won't fly in the real world. For example, not everyone out there operates under an honor system. If you've ever tried to buy a used car, or get a straight answer from a politician running for office, or ask your 2 small children whose bright idea it was to prop your Fender Telecaster against the bed and race Hot Wheels down the fretboard, then you know that direct honesty isn't most people's default position. And I've heard it said about honor systems that they are naive, that they do not train students to compete in a dog-eat-dog world, and that they are temporary and idealistic at best. And all of that is true provided you assume that being a citizen does not require you to be a good one, or that the way of the world is a given rather than a product of the people who live within it. I don't assume either of these things. More than that, I declare that the opposite is true. In short, your 4 years here, if you take full advantage of them, will not only train that extraordinary instrument, but will also inspire you to make the world a better place to inhabit. Finally, I promised to return to the guy on MTV who never took a shower. As it turns out, some of you know this, he was an actual cast member from the 1994 season set in San Francisco. His name was David Rainey. He not only refused to use soap, but he also caused so much trouble for everyone else in the house that he became the first cast member to be thrown off the show, after which the ratings took a nosedive. Without him, there was no drama, no tension. His nickname was Puck. Puck is also a character from William Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. In the play, Puck is a mischievous nature sprite who wreaks havoc and functions as the central engine of the plot, exactly like MTV's Puck. Now, I was able to make these connections not because I'm a literature professor who happens to be married to a Shakespearean, but because I'm a product of a liberal arts education, which underscores my point. You never know when Shakespeare will help you understand the real world. Welcome to Rhodes.